I didn't make 4 advent calendars. I made one and then I turned it into completely different designs. Let me show you how one simple idea can become a whole set of advent calendars. These all use the same ornament design that I made for Cricut Design Space. So instead of repeating the same step over and over, I'm going to walk you through it once, how to cut it, how to assemble it, and then fill it with candy. And then I'll show you the few different ways to turn them into completely different advent calendars. So I quickly wanted to go over with you the supplies that I'm using to make the Christmas bulbs. So I've just got some 12 by 12 cardstock that I picked up at the dollar store. And for the bulbs itself, I'm going to need 8 sheets of cardstock. So I'm just going to take sort of the top 8 pages from my cardstock package and then throw them through my Cricut. So I'm quickly going to walk you through how to use the bulb file in Cricut Design Space so that you can maximize your cut space on your paper. So let's jump over to our computers for that. So I want to quickly walk you through how to use the Christmas bulb file that we have for this project. So I've left a link below in the description of this video on how to access a free copy of my Christmas bulb. So all you want to do in Cricut Design Space is hit the upload button and then you're going to click and drag the file over into your upload canvas. You're going to add the file to your canvas and we're going to view our canvas. So when you pull this file into Cricut Design Space, depending on what update Cricut has recently done, this file is going to be either really big or really small. So what we want to do is you want to make sure that we have our lock dimensions is locked so that our proportions stay the same, so that it stays as a ball. And we want to change the width from whatever you have to 6 inches. So at 6 inches, this is going to be a good size to make a ball that fits Halloween candy sized treats inside. Before you print off 1,000 of these for your calendar, I recommend you print one off only and then see how well it shapes and sizes to what you're going to put inside of it. Now, I'm doing a countdown calendar that has 24 pieces because on the 25th day, which is Christmas Day, we don't actually open the calendar. We are already celebrating Christmas, so we only do 24. But either way, you're going to need to duplicate this enough times to have 24 of these or 25 of these, depending on how you're going to do it. But the one thing I want to show you quickly is what I've been doing, because Cricut's been a little bit tricky when I've been cutting things out. Typically it's been crashing on like page 3 or whatever, and then I have to redo all of my spacing. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to duplicate 3 copies of this, because at 6 inches in width I can only fit 3 of these on a 12 by 12 piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to add quickly a shape here, and I'm going to add in a square. And I'm going to change this square to be 11.5 by 11.5 because that's as big as Cricut will let me cut out on my 12 by 12 mat. I'm going to actually place this, rearrange this to the back so it stays at the back. I'm going to actually place my Christmas bulbs on this sheet so that I can, whoops, that's not what I wanted, rotate here. So that I can have 3 of them on my sheet nicely without having to rearrange them every time, or all 24 on my cutting mat, because that takes up a lot more time and a lot more effort. And like I said, for me recently, Cricut's been crashing after I've rearranged everything on my mats, so it's a little bit of a nuisance. So I'm going to move this one over just a smidgen here so that it's within my 11 by 11. And now this space here that I've got, I'm going to be able to save this little piece of cardstock at least, and the rest is going to be trash. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this square now that I had, and I'm going to delete it. I'm going to select my 3 pieces that I've got, and I'm going to attach them. Now you can either duplicate this to have 24 pieces, or we can simply select make, and we're not going to save this. And over here in project copies, you can increase this to have 8 sheets, which will give you 24 pieces of these bulbs. And so this will just cut out 8 pieces of this exact same sheet so that you don't need to cut out or make more copies on your canvas. And for me, I found that this helps me not have Cricut crash as often as it's been with when I'm doing just the one, when I'm doing 24 pieces individually. So I'm going to click continue, and I'm just going to cut this out with a regular cardstock setting, and then I will meet you back at my workstation. So now I've got 24 of these cut out, and there's 3 in sort of each color. And if you followed through on my design on how to maximize the space on your 12 by 12, you should have a stack of leftover bits. And this is sort of the corner piece. If you want to, I've left a link below to another video on what you can do with this scrap paper so that it doesn't totally go to waste. So just keep that in mind. That's down at the bottom of in the descriptions below. So my glue gun is currently heating up for this. I recommend using your glue gun when making these bulbs just because the glue dries a little bit faster and we have a lot of these to get through. So you don't need to fold anything, but I'm just going to give you an idea. We're going to glue only on one side each so that they can sort of fall into each other like this. So I'm going to show you a video of how I do it, but we're not going to do all 24 together. I'm just going to show you and then we can jump over to our next steps after that. Okay, so now that my glue gun is hot, I'm going to quickly just demonstrate one time how to assemble these because this is a little bit tricky to record. And I'm just going to put glue on the side right there, and then I'm going to fold this piece up onto it like that and hold it there. I'm using hot glue, it will dry pretty quickly. And then once this is dry enough, I'm going to then do the next piece. So bear with me as I do bad camera angles here because this isn't always the easiest thing to demonstrate. And I'm just going to continue around the whole side of my bulb here. Now for the last one, I'm going to put glue, oops, hold that shut. For the last one, I'm going to put glue on this side and in here as well. So it's a little bit hard. So one here and here. So this is going to be sort of a two at once, and it's a little bit harder to do. We're going to try not to burn ourselves. Sorry, I don't have a great camera angle. And we're going to squish this together like so and not burn ourselves. Okay, so that's how we do one of these. So we've got 24 of these to do. Don't close the lid until the very end, like until after we've filled it with candy, because we still need to put something in there, right? So don't trick yourself into getting these closed up too soon. So that's gonna happen later. So I'm gonna quickly do all 24 of these, and then we'll meet up in a moment again. For the numbers that I'm going to use on this calendar, I've designed some numbers that you can get access to on my website through my resource library. I've left a link for that below in the description, but all you're going to need is a piece of paper. You can use an 8.5 by 11. I'm just using a scrap piece because I don't need very much, and just a pen to use with my Cricut. If you don't have a Cricut pen or marker, I've left a link below as well, so you can read about on some tips and tricks on how to use other non-Cricut brand markers with your Cricut. So I'm going to quickly walk you through how to modify the file so that it fits the Christmas bulbs that we've got, and then we will cut this out on our Cricuts. The next file that we want to upload is we want to pull in our numbers. So I've got the Christmas numbers. This is the numbers that come with this file. And what we simply need to do is, again, we're going to import this into our Cricut Design Space. You'll notice that this is teeny tiny when it comes into Cricut Design Space. We want to make sure that when again, we're going to change the dimensions on this. We're going to make sure that our lock is locked, and we're going to change this to 4.5 inches in height. This will give us a good size for each of these items. So we're going to select ungroup over here, and we're going to just do a double check here. So you'll notice that the height of each of the bows is going to be about 0.93. The stars is going to be 1. And the bulbs is going to be 0.1. This is a good size. Now the one thing I want to point out though is these numbers right now are set to basic cut, and we want to change these into a draw because we're going to be drawing them with our Cricut. So you can either do select one by one, go select in your operations menu and change this to pen, and that will be that, or you can go on your side here and hold each number down while holding the control key down on your keyboard and selecting the numbers and scrolling through all of these and then changing them as a group to, bear with me here, I'm going to change these all to from basic cut to pen. So now this is all going to be penned in, but you have to realize is they're still not together. So if I move that, it's going to go away from it. So I want to do each piece individually. I'm going to select the 2 items and then I'm going to attach them. Once they're all attached, then it is okay to send this to cut. So I can either select the whole grouping and attach them, or I can do it individually this way from on my canvas. Once those are all done, we can send that to our Cricut to cut them out, and make sure that you've got your pen in your pen holder. If you do not have a Cricut pen or marker, don't worry, I've got you covered. I have a link in the description below of a post that I've made where I go through how to use different pens on your Cricut that are not Cricut pens to help you get through that. Right after Halloween, I grab candy from my kids' candy stash. Sometimes I let them participate in picking out the candies that they want to include in this. This allows my kids to have a sweet treat every day during the advent calendar season. As a pro tip, I like to ensure that my kids are either all having the same candy on the same day, or making sure that they're picking out their candies so that they're getting what they like. So I've got my candies all numbered, I've got my numbers printed off, and I've got all of my bulbs cut and glued. So the next thing that we have to do is we get to wrap our candies, put them into our bulbs. Now I like to put them into some tissue paper just so that if you have little prying eyes, they're not going to look through these holes, and that way it's a little bit easier to keep it all sort of closed off from them. And you don't need a big piece of tissue paper, just the little square is fine. So I'm going to pre-slice some of this with my paper cutter, and it's just enough to wrap it around the candy so that you don't see what it is. And when I've got this sort of activity happening, I'm going to be doing wrapping the candy, putting it into the bulb, and right away putting the number on it, because these are all numbered accordingly to make sure that my kids don't get different candies on different days. So assuming the numbers stayed the way that they're supposed to, we should be good to go. So I'm going to quickly cut some pieces of tissue paper, and then we will do some assembly together, and then we'll fast forward through the rest. All right, so we're going to start assembling this, and I'm just going to quickly grab a piece of tissue paper here, wrap my little candy in it. I gotta make sure I've got number 3 ready next. I'm gonna shove this in here so that nobody sees it. I'm gonna glue this down. But before I do that, I need to make sure I find number 3. I like to get my numbers attached here so that I don't lose them, because I'm good at losing stuff. Okay, so my candy is ready to be put in here. My glue gun is hot, so I'm just going to quickly glue the top here. To keep this in place. And then I'm going to put the number 3 sort of on the bottom here. And then I've got number 3 done. So I'm going to do all of these. I've got 24 to do. And you just want to hold this shut a little bit to make sure it shuts, because sometimes the candies like to stick out even though the boxes are big enough. And so we're going to do the rest of these, and we will go from there. Let's start with the original version first, because every other calendar builds from the same idea. So the idea is that we're going to hang these Christmas bulbs. So I've got some wooden dowels here, and I'm just going to glue a few of them together to make them longer and thicker. So I'm going to glue them together like so, and that way they will be able to hold on to my Christmas bulbs, and they've got a little bit more strength than just one. You can use any size. I recommend using about a 1/4 inch size or a 3/16 size, but I mean whatever you've got handy works just as well. And then just going to quickly glue these together and then wrap it with some ribbon. Now that my dowels are glued together, they don't look very pretty. So what I'm going to do is I've got some nice felt ribbon here, and I'm just going to wrap this around my dowels so that I've got a nice finish on it, so that it doesn't look ugly. And then I'm just going to glue that on. Just gonna add a little bit of glue onto my dowels. So the one thing that we're going to be doing is each of these bulbs is going to be hanging off of this dowel that we've created. And they're going to be hanging at different lengths so that we can fit more of them together. And they're actually going to be attached on top here with ribbon glued on, and it's going to go around the top of the dowel. So there's going to be 4 or 5 different lengths of ribbon that we want. so that we can have them arranged in this sort of a fashion, hanging down like this. So we're going to quickly measure out. I've got 3 different colors of blue that I'm going to use for different lengths of ribbon. And we just want to measure the length of the ribbon so that it goes all the way from the dowel to the ribbon and back. So for the short one, well, just as an example, if the shortest one's going to be up top, we want to have enough ribbon here to attach it at the top, go around my dowel, and then come back. So that would be about 8 inches long. And we would repeat this measuring process for each of the different lengths of ribbon that we want. And we can give a little bit more or less depending on the length that we want. Just remember that we have to fit 24 of these in here, so it takes up a little bit of space. So if you can get 4 or 5 in a row, that's ideal so that they can last, so they can be longer. But you can also do it staggered, so do 3 and 4 and 5 and 4 and 3, or however you'd like to get it to come out nicely. So I'm going to quickly cut up a bunch of ribbon at different lengths, and then we're going to start to glue these together. So there's 2 ways that we can attach our bulbs onto our dowel. So the one is what I had talked about originally, was you've got the loop over the dowel and then attached to the bulb. The one concern that I have with this method is that when I have it attached, and if my numbers aren't sequentially in order, getting them off will be difficult. So another thing that we can do, which is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to attach the ribbon in one spot onto the bulb, and then I'm going to leave my ribbon fully loose so that later I can attach all of my bulbs onto the dowel with just a bow so that you can untie each one individually. So what I've done is I've organized my bulbs into the lengths. So I've got short, medium, long, and extra long lengths. And what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to start tying each one on sort of from one of each pile into each one after another onto my dowel so that I've got bulbs hanging down. And I can adjust them as I go to see how long I'd like them or how short I'd like them. So I'm just going to be tying them on right now. And the number order doesn't matter because it's always fun to have to find the number sequences when they're looking for the treat. And I'm simply just going to tie it on with a little bow so that they can actually get them off later. So now that I have a few done, they'll stagger like so when they're hanging, and I'm going to just continue on my way with more. So I've got the option to do different lengths between them so that there's space, and I'm trying to keep them individually pulled so that later when they're pulling them off, they can just pull it right off and it'll come undone and they can grab their treat. So now that all of my bulbs are attached onto my dowel, I'm just going to take another piece of ribbon and tie it onto both ends so that I've got something to hang it with. Now what I like to do with this is I like to leave enough extra ribbon so that I can tie a knot at the top middle so that it won't shift around, because as we start to take the treats out of the bulbs throughout the holiday season, the calendar is going to start to shift because of the weight distribution. So if I pre-tie a knot in the middle, it will stop it from moving around as much later. So I'm just going to grab a length, about like so. I'm going to tie it onto each end. Okay. And now this spot here, which is roughly the center, I'm going to grab it and tie it into a knot. Okay, and I've got a knot there, a loop, so I can hang that up onto my wall. So that's it, the calendar is done. So now I just need to go hang it up on my wall and just my bulbs. And there you have it. Your Christmas bulb countdown calendar is complete. Each bulb can simply be pulled right off of the hanger and it's ready to access the treat. Now, watch how changing just the layout completely transforms this advent calendar. The supplies that we're going to need to make the base of the tree is just an old cereal box, a cardboard tube. You can use like a paper towel tube, or if you want, you can use a vinyl tube. The only thing is, if you're using a vinyl tube, these are a lot thicker, and if you need to cut it to size, it's a lot harder. You'll need to use a saw for this, and you can use scissors for this. So I recommend this, and then you'll need a glue gun with glue, and that's going to be all that we'll need for our base. So, and we'll also need a paper cutter to cut our cardboard box up. So we're going to start off by cutting up the box. When I'm cutting up the boxes, what I typically do is I just open it up and then throw it through my paper cutter here, since I don't need any fancy designs. So I don't need to use my Cricut. My paper cutter will work fine. And so simply just folding all the pieces in here so that it doesn't get jammed. I'm going to cut a bunch of this box. Now I collect boxes for just this occasion, and I like these thicker ones than the thin ones. Now we don't need to have a perfect size for these width-wise. I mean, we just want to be having this about an inch and a half in width, because this just needs to hold the bulbs together on each level of the tree. It doesn't need to be very thick, it just needs to be sort of small enough so that we can make a circle out of this. So I'm going to cut these at about an inch and a half, so basically half this piece here will turn into 2 pieces. And I'll only need 4 of these for this tree, but I've got 3 kids, so I need more than 1 tree. So I'm going to quickly move over to the next step of assembling these to our bulbs. So all of our bulbs are completed and we have them all numbered. Now you have an option of either doing it so that you have 1 at the top and then going all the way around, spiraling down the tree to 24 at the bottom, or you can put them randomly over the tree wherever you'd like. I'm going to do 1 at the top and go all the way down to the bottom, so I will organize these, and the last layer is going to be the last number. So I have all of my bulbs lined up in order. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way to 24. And each row is a different number of which layer it's going to be on the tree. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the bottom layer, and I'm going to organize them so that I can do 1 layer at a time. And we are going to glue them onto our pre-cut cardboard pieces. So I've arranged them so that they're in numerical order going around, and you want to make sure that the number is facing outwards on each of these bulbs, for the most part at least. And so this is the circle that we're going to be creating here with our cardboard. And so it's not like a precise science here, it's just enough so that we've got an ability to have these bulbs stay in place. So all I'm going to do is, for the first one, I'm going to just glue these 2 bits of the cardboard together so that it sort of forms a circle. Something to keep in mind when you're gluing on the numbers and when you're making your bulbs, you want to, for this one, you want to try to make the numbers facing the right direction. I wasn't paying attention with this one and I put the number on sideways. I've got a few that are also on upside down or backwards. So with this tree, you want to make sure that they are at least facing the right direction, or that you line up the bulbs later so that they are in the right direction instead of just standing like the little candy boxes that they're supposed to be. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're working on these. Also, when we're doing this, we want to make sure that the design of the cereal box is on the inside, not on the outside, because this will shine through a little bit on the other side and we don't really want that. So I'm just going to glue this shut, making sure that the right side is facing inwards, or the colored side is facing inwards, to hide what I'm trying to hide. And I'm just going to close that shut. Now, when I'm going to be gluing this into place here, I don't want to glue this down at the ground. I want to kind of glue this midsection of the bulbs. So when I take a bulb, I'm going to kind of glue it right in the center. I'm not going to glue it at the bottom or at the top, just sort of center-wise, so that when this is all glued, the bulbs are what's sitting on the ground and this is just holding them together. Now that I've got the first bottom layer done, I'm going to do the same thing for the next 3 layers. So the second topmost layer is going to be a little bit challenging because you have a little hole here. Now if you want to just glue these together, you can. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this from before just to help me to sort it out and make sure that they stay nice and sort of rounded. And all I'm going to do is just throw this through my paper cutter. I only need about 1 inch in size, so it's not a huge amount. And I need to trim this tube anyways for my later portions of this. So I'm just going to use this bit here instead of trying to wrap around my cardboard box. Again, numbers going outside. We're just going to glue this center-wise there. I actually don't like how loose this is, so I've cut this open here. I'm going to glue this just a little bit closer together so that it's not so big, because I don't want to have my tissue box showing as much. I want it hidden. All right, now that one's done as well. So now is for a bit of a tricky part. Each of these circles needs to sit on top of the other one, but we're not gluing this piece to the next one. We're gonna have it sort of attached through the center, and I'm gonna be using my paper towel roll for that, and it's gonna sort of sit in the middle of each one. Now, I'm gonna do one layer at a time, but I'm going to sit my toilet paper roll tube in here, and I'm gonna cut 3 to 4 pieces of just surplus cardboard that I have and glue it to the walls of my tree and to the outside of my toilet paper tube. So they're just going to be little spokes here glued into place. Now for the bottom layer, I'm gonna need about 1 inch based off of just sort of an eyeballing measurement here. And I'm just gonna cut a bunch of pieces. And the idea is that this is gonna sort of help it stand in place. Now while my glue gun is heating up, I want to take a measurement here to see how high up I need to have my toilet roll tube, because at a certain point here, it's actually going to need to be cut off, because this fourth piece here, I had to make the tube smaller. So I'm gonna have to cut this, and I'm just gonna mark it off with a pen here so that I know I wanna kind of cut it at about this level here so that I can attach an extra piece and have my top pieces still glued together. So I'm just gonna, again, run this through my paper cutter. And this leftover piece is gonna get snipped through here. So for the bottom, I'm gonna be gluing 1 piece onto the wall of my cardboard tube. And now I'm going to put glue onto the outer edges and squish this into place. The first layer is the easiest because I can pull my center tube in and out. Once I move on to the next levels, it becomes more difficult because I have to place everything the way that I want it. So I need to place this second layer the way that I want to on top of my layer below so that the bulbs sit around nicely around the sides. So I'm just going to show you this way. I'm going to align them sort of nicely around here to make it look like a tree. And I'm not going to be able to go in and out anymore with this, so I'm going to do gluing both sides at the same time. There's no turning back after these get glued in place. Now for this next little part, I'm going to actually use a piece of scrap green paper that I have to make a little platform here. I don't want to use my cardboard that I have because it's got designs from my cereal on it, and I'm gonna just sort of glue this down and fold it around so that it kind of hides a little bit of this extra stuff that I have here. Now there's no exact science to this. I'm just going to go a little bit overboard with my glue here, stick this into place, and curl my paper down. Nothing super fancy. Now this next piece is going to sit on top here like this. I want to arrange this somehow so that it looks nice. I should have probably done a better job coordinating my colors, but oh well. With this top 2 layers, what I'm going to do is I've cut my paper towel roll and I'm going to put this in between here so that it reaches all the way down to the bottom. But I'm also going to cut this so that it cuts at the sort of the height here so that I don't have any surplus on top of this. And so I'm going to mark this down again so that I know where to cut. And now this piece is going to go into here and I'm going to glue it into place so it doesn't move first. So just with my glue gun, I'm going to make sure this is rolled small enough so that I can fit it through here and then have it expand when it goes in. And I'm just going to sort of glue a bead around the center here and then drop it in and make sure that it goes all the way to the bottom of the layer that I just did before so that I've got enough space there for that. And now while this is drying, I'm going to put glue at the bottom of this piece, which is longer than the one that I initially installed, onto my layer to hold it together. And we're going to glue this into here. Now that's going to stay there on that level. So the final thing that we need to do is this top bulb, our number 1, is going to sit on top of this. Now I'm just going to do a bead of glue around this and then put this down onto here so that it fits. Nothing crazy, nothing super chaotic, just glue, press, and hold. Now our Christmas tree countdown calendar is complete. So I'm going to just change angles here and we will take a look at this. And there you have it. We've successfully finished our Christmas bulb tree countdown calendar. I hope you've enjoyed this project as much as I have. Let me know in the comments below if you've tried it or if you have any suggestions on how to make this project better. But this next one looks completely different and it uses the exact same design. I quickly just want to go over the supplies that we're going to need to make the candy cane body itself. So you're going to need a cereal box, you're going to need some ribbon, you're going to need about 10 feet, 11 feet of ribbon for the way that I've done it, but you can use, if you're better at wrapping things with ribbon, you might be able to use less, and you will need your glue gun with some hot glue. So when I'm making the outline for the candy cane, I'm going to be using a cereal box. Now I just want to point out that some cereal boxes are better than others. This Cheerios box, for example, is very thick, which is nice. So it's kind of got a more solid body to it. This Crispix one is like super flimsy and it doesn't have as good of a support system for it. So I recommend the thicker cereal boxes. Even like cracker boxes will work well. I do not recommend cardboard boxes because that will not cut through with your Cricut, at least not with my Explorer 2. Alright, so I'm quickly going to walk you through how to use the candy cane outline file in Cricut Design Space. So we're going to select the upload button and we're going to select upload image. And from here, I'm simply going to copy and drag my image over and it's going to show up here. I'm going to click continue. I'm going to leave the name and everything the same and upload this into Cricut Design Space. Now when this file comes into Cricut Design Space, you're not always going to get the right size coming in. So what we want to do is we want to double check that this is locked so that nothing changes unproportionately. And we're going to change this 19.3. Oh, today it's coming in at the right size. So we want this to be 19.375 or 19.4 so that the project works the best. So once you have that set to the right size, all you need to do is send this off to cut on your Cricut. So I've sliced up my cardboard box, and the one thing I want to point out is my mat isn't super sticky, but even if your mat is, when you're cutting out cardboard, I recommend that you tape this down very securely with some tape. And I like to just use my green painter's tape so that it stays in place, because this is going to go through the machine 2 or 3 times and it's going to start to wibble and wobble if we don't have it secure. So I'm just going to give this a good taping into place so that it stays put, because we don't want this moving around because I only have a limited number of cereal boxes. And the last thing I want to point out is, since our cereal box isn't 12 by 12 or a standard 8.5 by 11, when you are adjusting the things on your mat, you want to make sure that you've got sort of set this up on your screen so that it fits within the spot of your cereal box. So my box is about 11 by 10, so I'm making sure that everything fits on an 11 by 10 spot on my cutting canvas so that it cuts out nicely. And then finally, I'm going to select it to be a flat cardboard setting. So now that it's been cut once, before I pull it out, I'm just gonna double check here, and I can see that it hasn't cut out all the way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna hit my C go button again and cut this through one more time. Okay, so that's cut out good enough. So I'm gonna go to my next page. So this is cut out good enough right now, so I'm just going to pull these off and start to get my candy cane assembled. So I quickly want to just review what we should have cut out after we finished cutting this out with our Cricut. We should have a candy cane, so the big top part and the bottom part. We should have 5 1-inch thick support wall pieces and 2 1.5 pieces. You might end up needing, depending on how good you are at lining things up, you might end up needing another one of these, but 5 should be enough. And then these 2 1.5-inch pieces are going to be our intersection of the candy cane to provide it with a little bit more depth and support. So this will be a little bit too long, so the last one you will need to trim a little bit when you are installing all of this. So you can also leave the tape on if you'd like, or the tape off. With this candy cane, when we're assembling it, it doesn't matter if you're facing in or out with the design, because this is all going to be covered. If you like, you can have it all facing with the brown side facing out, so if anything peeps through when we're wrapping this up later, it'll all just be the brown as opposed to your fancy cereal box colors. So the choice is yours. I'm going to try to have the brown side out, but I'm typically good at forgetting to verify that when I'm doing my final gluing. So that's what we've got to do next. So I'm just warming up my glue gun and we're going to start to assemble this. Okay, so my glue gun is hot, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to glue this together. Now, the one thing that I had to do when I was cutting this out with my Cricut and the size of my cereal boxes is that this candy cane needed to be cut into 2 pieces. So you have an option. I'm going to just put a little bit of a small piece of surplus cardboard that I had left over from my cutting that I'm going to glue this piece to this piece. You can do it on the inside or on the outside. The choice is totally yours. I'm going to be sort of gluing my candy cane with the color on the inside so that it doesn't show through by accident anywhere. Now you can use just tape if you want, or you can use leftover cardboard. I'm just going to use a little piece of cardboard and glue this baby together. Nothing too fancy. And now the fun part begins. So remember, when we're doing this, we have 5 pieces that are 1.5 inches wide and 2 pieces that are just a bit wider than 1.5 inches wide. These ones are our center pieces, so we don't want to get them mixed up with our wall pieces. So just keep that in mind. You want to keep them organized. I'm going to put these 2 off to the side so I don't mistakenly use them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to precariously glue these 2 pieces together all the way around and work my way through. Now you don't need to do a perfect job gluing this because this is all going to be hidden. You just want to glue it well enough so that it stays together. All right, now I'm just gonna let that dry and hopefully not let it glue to my workstation too crazily so that I can actually use this still. So the next part that we need to do is I've got these pieces that are a little bit bigger than 1.5 inch, and these are supposed to go sort of in the center here. And the purpose of these is just to give the candy cane a little bit more shape on the outside when we wrap it. You don't need to do this, but it's totally up to you if you want to. I'm going to do that just so that my candy cane is a little bit more roundness when I'm wrapping it up with the ribbon, and that's going to give the bulbs that I glue onto it later a little bit more space and more depth and making it look a little bit prettier. So I'm just going to glue this again with my glue gun here, and this time I'm going to glue onto this part and then sort of place it down. I'm going to try to place it in the center here like that. And I had to let my glue gun cool down for a second while I did something else. So while that's warming up again, I'm just going to do a quick measurement here on this inner piece because it's got to be trimmed a little bit. And I'm gonna just snip it kind of here, taking off the 1.5 inches. And this one's gonna go in the center like so. All right, so I'm just gonna glue this precariously. And I'm gonna put this, try to center this as best as I can. Now it doesn't need to be perfect, and it doesn't need to look perfect because this is gonna all be hidden inside of our ribbon later. And this one goes here. Now this one I'm gonna hold for a few moments while the glue dries so that it stays in place. So you'll notice here on mine, I've got a little bit of like loose bits that didn't get covered up with the glue. You can cover these up, you can cut these up if you cut these off with your scissors if you'd like. You can leave them. This corner here I'm gonna do a little bit of cleanup with because it's pretty big, but all these other edges that are sort of coming off the side, those are totally fine to stay the way that they are because they're gonna get hidden with our ribbon in a moment. So I'm just gonna quickly cut through 1 inch of glue here. And now this is ready to go. So I've got this velvety plastic 2.5 inch red ribbon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my whole candy cane in this so that it's just spiraled around it and covering it up. So my candy cane will be red, and I'm going to just start off by putting a little dab of glue here at the end to start this off. But I want to point out that when you're using hot glue and this ribbon, it can like melt it because this is plastic and hot glue is really hot. So I like to let my glue sort of cool down before I use it for this part. And here at the end, I'm just trying to cover the back part here so that I've got enough ribbon to hide the box on the inside. And I'm just gonna do a little bit of glue on the inside here to put this into place there, just so that it sticks and I've got something to do there with that. And I'm gonna do the same thing on this end here. All right, and I'm going to start now to do the whole ribbon itself. Sorry, the whole candy cane itself. And I'm going to make sure that I sort of start on the back side. And most of this is going to be hidden anyways, so it's not going to be a huge deal, but obviously we want it to look as nice as we can so that it looks pretty. Now the first little wraps here, you want to make sure it's a little bit tighter so that these corners are hidden. And now we're just going to wrap the candy cane. Now I have a whole lot of this red ribbon, so I'm going to be generous when I'm wrapping this all around. Right, so I'm gonna just sort of trim this here so that it's hiding on the back side. A little bit of my not super hot glue, and I'm going to put these pieces down as well with a little bit of hot glue so that they're kind of hiding. But remember, my hot glue is not super hot anymore because I want this to not leak through the ribbon. And so it's super stringy. And I'm just gonna hold that in place for a second. All right, so our candy cane is completed now. I just want to point something out. When I was making this candy cane itself, and all the sizing that I've done is based off of some forethought. And so before I actually made the candy cane, I had all of my bulbs pre-cut and glued together. Now they don't have the numbers on them, but what I did was I actually measured out how many bulbs I could fit along the full length of the candy cane to get it to go all the way around with 24 bulbs. If you're making your candy cane bigger or smaller, or your bulb is bigger or smaller, you will need to do a test run, right? So you'll need to get all of your bulbs cut out in the size that you want if you're not going with 6 inches like I did. Get them all cut out and glued, and then place them around into a candy cane position so that you can see how big your candy cane will need to be. I've gone with 14 inches because that's enough space that I can kind of wrap all of my bulbs around the candy cane and give it a little bit of depth and make it look pretty cool. So if you want to change the sizes, you will need to keep that in mind for the whole thing, not just for the bulbs or the candy cane itself. All right, so now comes the tricky part about making this candy cane countdown calendar. We have 24 bulbs that we need to attach onto this candy cane. Now, the bulbs are a good size, so realistically what's going to happen is you're probably just going to be able to get 3 per section of the candy cane. You can arrange them a little bit differently so that you can get 4 and offset them, but you need to be mindful of how you're putting them on. Additionally, you want to make sure that you're starting with the big numbers first so that they're kind of off to the side or underneath, because they're going to be the last ones to be pulled off and you don't want them sort of hiding the smaller numbers. And then I'm going to be hanging mine on a wall, so it's going to be sort of attached here with a ribbon at the end. I can't put bulbs on the back, but if you're going to hang this like on a tree or somewhere else or off of a mantle, you can go all the way around. You'll just need to change the sizes a little bit in order to have enough space for all the bulbs. So I'm just going to arrange them with the larger numbers at the bottom and then the smaller numbers at the top. That way my kids can pull off the smaller numbers first and then still have access to the other numbers. So it's kind of gonna go like this, but I will be gluing them on so that they're not kind of all over the place. Now these ones here are my top numbers and they need to be staying on the side so that they don't get lost in the shuffle. So now I'm just going to glue these on, and I'm going to try gluing them on a little bit differently, but I want to be able to have the numbers showing on the calendar every time so that they're not totally blocked off. So like this 17, I'm going to want to make sure that's kind of off to the side so not in the way. The 19 could stay like this because if I put my next one over top like that so that you can actually see the numbers, but you don't want to block the numbers off just so that your kids don't get upset. So I'm going to use my glue gun again, and I'm going to quickly glue on all these pieces. Okay, so now that my candy cane is covered in bulbs, I'm just gonna let all the pieces dry to make sure that they don't fall off before I attach my final ribbon. All right, so now that all of my bulbs are securely dried and attached to the candy cane, the last thing I need to do is put on some ribbon onto the back so I can hang this on my wall. And I'm just gonna use 1/2-inch ribbon here. I'm gonna pull a big sort of strand out so that I've got enough to make it from behind the sort of center of my candy cane to a little bit above, so I've got an easy way to hang this up. And I'm just going to cut this, tie it, and glue it. So nothing too fancy here, just a simple glue to this. And I'm just going to glue it here. Now if you want to, you could have wrapped this around beforehand around the candy cane so that it would be more secure if you wanted to, but I like to just glue this stuff into place and it holds it very well. All right, and now all that's left to do is to hang this on the wall once this is dry and it's ready to go. And there you have it. Your candy cane countdown calendar is complete. I hope you've enjoyed this craft as much as I have. If you've tried this, let me know how it turned out for you. And if you have any tips or tricks to make this project better, let me know. And for the last one, I wanted to see what happened when I took the same idea and made it a little more dramatic. So now that all of my bulbs are done, they all have their numbers on them, I'm going to quickly glue on a little piece of ribbon on top and a little hook. I've got a bunch of these little Christmas ornament hooks. And so I'm going to sort of just flatten it out a little bit so that I can hook it onto here. And we're just going to glue these on so that I can hang these up. So bear with me as I make a mess out of this. And we're just gluing these on because I can't actually glue on the hook by itself. So that's a really bad first one, but they'll get better as they go. And we just want to make sure that this is loose. And once my glue is dry, I'm going to loop the hook around a little bit more so that it doesn't poke anybody or fall off. So now that all these are dry, I'm just going to wrap the loop around so that it's not a big spiky poke coming out, and then I'm going to hang these up on my tree on the wall. So let's move over to our tree and we'll get that started. So to make our tree, what we're going to need is we're going to need some command strips. I like the 3M ones. You're going to need some hooks. You'll need about 11 or 12 of these. I've 3D printed these ones off because I use them a lot, and I left the link for the file for these specific ones in the description below. You'll need some painter's tape, or you can use regular tape. I like this stuff because it doesn't peel the paint off of my walls. And we're going to need some tinsel. I'm using gold tinsel because I can't find my green stuff. I used to have a lot of it, but I guess the kids put it somewhere and I can't find it. So this year we're doing gold, but you can use green or rainbow colored or whatever you would like. Okay, so let's jump over to our wall and start putting this tree together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got my 3M clips, and I'm going to just attach one onto the wall here, sort of at the center point of my where my Christmas tree is going to go. And I'm going to put it kind of right there. And I'm going to put this clip on here. And before I'm going to make sure this sticks on here for 30 seconds, so bear with me. And I just want to make sure that I'm making a triangle, so I'm going to use some gravity here. And my tree is centered right here. I'm going to do about 2 feet off of each side. And so for now, I'm just going to put a little piece of tape on the ground so I know where I'm aiming for. 1.5 feet here, and 1.5 feet here, because I don't want this to be crazy big. Okay. And now I'm going to take that off so it doesn't fall down. And you can use ribbon or tape. I'm just going to use a big long piece of green tape so I can take it off later. That's why I know the size of my tree. Don't worry, I'll reuse this tape for something different later. I'll use lots of this stuff. Alright, so that's going to be the size of our tree. And next what we're going to do is we're going to strategically place hooks on different sides of the tree here so that it can stay up. Now, we want to make sure that we're not going on the tape, we're just going inside the tape. Alright, now those I'll have to wait for about half an hour before I can attach the next plates. Okay, so now that my clips have been sitting for a while, I can take off my green tape and I can start to attach my tinsel. Okay, so I'm going to use gold tinsel as my tree, just to change things up since I couldn't find any green that I had somewhere. And the first thing that I want to do with my tinsel is I want to tie a little bit of a knot at the top so that I can actually hold on to my clip here, because otherwise it's going to fall off. And when I've got these hook ones, I actually need to sort of loop around so that it stays in place and doesn't fall off, just like that. And that way it will keep it on that level. On these other ones that are a bit better hooks, you don't need to loop it around as much because they will actually stay in place. And we're just pulling our ribbon, our tinsel through, and then that's the end of our tree. And at the end here, I have a lot of this stuff. So I'm just gonna snip a little bit off and tie it into a knot so that it stays put. And that's our tree. Now I've got all my bulbs ready, and I'm just going to hang these on like a Christmas tree. Ideally you want the fronts hanging forwards with the numbers, but you don't need to. our tree is done. I don't have any fancy stars or anything, but I do want some sort of a star on top. So I'm just going to put a little ribbon on top. And there it is, all complete. So I quickly wanted to go over a few things that I learned while making this craft. The first thing was that I needed a lot more clips than I had anticipated. I initially thought that 7 or 8 would do. At the end, I ended up using 12 because I needed my clips to be closer together, especially at the top of the tree. So in the video, you'll notice that at one point I go from a few clips and then all of a sudden in the next image, there's a lot of clips. That's because in my test runs, I realized that I needed a lot more clips to make the tree have an actual tree shape instead of some sort of wonky look. The next thing that I wanted to go over is when I was making this tree, I started off the tree as a triangle with the very first clip at the top of the triangle. After I put the tinsel on it, that top clip kind of made it look weird. So what I did is I removed the top clip and had my tree actually start off at the side of the triangle instead of the tip of the triangle. And there you have it. Your wall-mounted Christmas tree is complete. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this craft. If you've tried making this countdown calendar, let me know how it turned out. So once you've made that one simple design, you can make all sorts of different advent calendars. It just depends on how you want to arrange it. If you want more easy DIYs like these, check out these other videos that I've left for you here. And be sure to let me know which one is your favorite. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting!